Richard Allen's fate hanging in the balance as we're recording this piece right now. He's accused, of course, being of the Delphi murderer category. We'll see if a jury believes that, as that is where it's sitting right now in their hands. They may already have the verdict by the time you're watching this. Joining me to discuss the case itself and how it's all played out up until its final moments, Eric Faddis, defense attorney and former prosecutor. Let's just kind of do the overview. Both sides have had a chance to now close their arguments, give it over to the jury. Let's start out here by talking about the prosecution of Mr. Richard Allen in this case, from what we knew before going into court to what we know now. How is it read out to you?
It's a bit lackluster to me, especially when you consider some of the bluster pretrial where they're talking about, oh gosh, we have 60 plus confessions. That's a slam dunk, right? Well, when we start to hear about the circumstances of the confessions, the timeline of the confessions, and with that, the questions that raises about the reliability of the confessions, I think that is a less strong case. And even when I was talking with Nancy Grace, and she is pretty pro prosecution. She saw the holes there too, and so if I was the prosecution, I'd be a little worried.
The prosecution came out with a lot of interesting pieces of evidence. They did, in fact, eventually play some of the audio from Richard Allen and video from behind bars. We've not heard it in the public, but people who have been there have relayed, of course, their accounts of it. They also played video of early interrogations, of early phone calls, of early interactions with Richard Allen. And from everything I've heard from anybody who has been in that courtroom, they sounded quite different. From a alert, concerned Richard Allen to a very almost, just robotic Richard Allen, saying, "I did it, I did it." Not, "I didn't do this." I mean, and of course, the story changes from "I had nothing to do with this" to "I did it. Tell everybody I did it." Just, um, did the prosecution go too far? Did they play too much? They had a lot of evidence, but is that in fact going to kill their case because they're showing every side of Richard Allen here, including a psychotic one?
Well, jurors are pretty smart and they're pretty perceptive. And so if you're showing two sides of the same person that are visibly contrastable, like you can see the visible differences in his mental state in the early interviews as compared to the later confession statements. I just think that a juror's going to put that together and say, hey, something is different between these two things. Did Richard Allen have a come to God moment and want to get something off his chest? Maybe that's what the prosecution's going to argue. But I think that there are some things in terms of how the confessions came out and the circumstances of them later that the jurors are really going to raise some eyebrows about.
People do sometimes feign mental illness or what have you when they're behind bars. So it can be looked at as, well, they're crazy. There's something wrong with them. But the extremes to which Richard Allen went to, and including their own expert that they brought in, said he's not feigning this. I mean, he's literally eating his own feces. He's eating the Bible. He's running his head into a wall, all while intermittently saying, "I did this" in a monotone voice, and being, basically held captive with no sense of anything on the outside, and basically tortured by guards saying and taunting him while he's away. It's kind of understandable why he was in the state that he was. Do you think everybody is going to believe in that jury box that, yeah, he was in fact he went psychotic because of what they were dealing with and what they were putting him through?
It's tough. Anytime you have a confession that is so hard to overcome, even if it's under questionable circumstances, because the conventional thinking is, why would a person ever admit to something horribly heinous they didn't do? But when you talk about him being in solitary confinement for a long time, when you talk about him feeling railroaded, feeling hopeless, feeling like what else can I possibly do? It starts to make sense. Like, hey, I'm going to tell these people what I think they want to hear,
Hmm.
and especially as my own mental health is visibly eroding. And so, what does that confession really mean at that point?
Yeah. I want to talk about some of the evidence as well that the prosecution brought up, and I'm interesting. I'm very interested in how they're qualifying some of this evidence, specifically the state trooper that confirms the voice matched Allen. Now, that's his testimony. The voice matched Allen. Is that all it is? Is it just him going up there going, "I listened to it. I think the voice matched Allen"? We didn't hear anything else as far as I'm aware that there was like any sort of technology used to actually verify this. Anybody can just say, "Yeah, I think this is the guy." That's not any sort of verifiable proof. It's a guy making a claim. But that seems to be what they're sitting on, that it matches Alan's voice in a very inaudible way.
Yeah, I mean, it would be so much more compelling if they did some kind of like audio analysis and they said, "Hey, here are the pitches of Richard Allen's voice." Typically, you could even do like an AI analysis of
Yeah.
his interviews and say, "Hey, here's the ranges within which he speaks. Here's sort of his cadence, and is the audio from that video consistent with that?" But no, it's just a dude up there saying, "Yeah, it kind of sounds like him."
And that's what amazes me, and that's just kind of like what they're resting on. I've never seen it where it's like this guy, and they're using it in a very technical way. Though it's a voice match. No, it's
Yeah.
not. It's someone's opinion. It's a guess. There's nothing that says that. The ballistics is the other thing, and that's being argued on both sides. Of course, the prosecution saying, "Yeah, look at this. This unspent round really matches Allen's Sig Sauer pistol." The problem with that is it's not a very complete science. Could have been in another gun and matched that too pretty accurately if it's the same type of gun. How strong do you think that is playing to the jury, and the fact that the jury now knows that that bullet was there after you had 30, 40 officers trampling through the place, and then they found it then.
Oh yeah, and this type of ballistics analysis has never been that compelling to me, especially when you hear it in court. It's really a person getting up there and saying, "Hey, like some marks on the back of this bullet look like what I might expect them to look like from this gun, so it's
Hmm.
got to be from this gun." But that's clearly there's some holes there, and I am not at all persuaded by the ballistics analysis in this case.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of holes, there's just so many holes in the prosecution's case. Were you expecting that they were going to have something up their sleeve that we were just sitting here going, they must have? They're being so bold in front of this case and just denying everybody's motion. It was either they have nothing and they really want everything that could possibly show he's innocent not coming to light, other than what already is going to be there because our case is so weak, or they have something really amazing. It feels like it was the latter.
Yeah, I really expected, especially in this type of an intimate, gruesome murder where there's a stabbing, you would expect some kind of DNA forensics. You would expect that if he brutally murdered and stabbed these and slit the throats of these two young girls, there would be some DNA transfer. There would be some hair that would get on to them, or some of their hair that would get on to him, or some kind of biological connection to what happened, and there is none.
Well, speaking of the hair, that was an interesting point too, and I think what their explanation was spoke so much to how incompetent this investigation was. You had people just commenting, "Well, we thought it might be a family member." Everything's up for grabs in a murder investigation. There's no, "Well, we thought maybe that just makes sense." No, there. What the hell is that? Where there was so much of that in this investigation because they did find some hair on the girls, but they tested it far later. The initial reaction was, "Yeah, it's family, it's this or that," on a body. I mean, what is that? Just inexperience? Is that just the podunk police department that just doesn't know what the hell they're doing, and they're just trying to do the best they can with what they have, including the limited knowledge and experience they have?
In a high level murder investigation, you've got to dot your I's and cross your T's because these are questions that the defense is going to explore if they're good. They're questions the jury is going to have. And so the prosecution, you want to try to answer those questions in advance, anticipate what they're going to be, do the analysis, and have an explanation to give to the jury. Here they didn't really. It was just kind of like, oh, like we eyeballed some stuff and like, oh, this makes sense to us.
Mhm.
So find this guy guilty. That's not enough, man.
Yeah. Let's go over to the defense of Richard Allen. I know we've been kind of arguing that along the way as we talk about the actual prosecution, but yeah, those confessions are a big thing, and having that psychologist come in who wasn't talking to podcasters, who wasn't researching the case, who wasn't biased, seemed to have a pretty solid explanation, a pretty solid background as well. Who do you think probably read better to that jury? The defense psychologist that talked about him, or the one that had the tainted history?
That's the thing is the defense psychologist is more unassailable. They didn't have the bias or apparent bias that the prosecution side did. And on top of that, it was so critical to have that because, like I said, intuitively we think, hey, no one's going to confess to something they didn't do. And I thought the defense psychologist did a good job of explaining in a digestible way how that could actually happen after a series of horrible events that Richard Allen has been through.
It's yeah, I mean, it's been very surprising to see just kind of how some of these things have played out, and what's read better. Initially here, when the defense was going in, and right before this case started, we were all looking at this going, gosh, it feels like they stripped them of, any defense that they could have. But I guess that wasn't so bad when there's not much of a prosecution either. It turned out both were playing with half decks, it seems, of what they were allowed to, except the defense actually had some real stuff that just wasn't allowed into the case.
Yeah, and that's a big potential problem. So there's case law in most jurisdictions that says that the judge cannot preclude the only defense that defense is running. If they have one sole defense, and here arguably was the Odinist defense that someone else was involved in this, and Judge Gold prohibited that. When
Mhm.
you prohibit the only sole defense, that is a real potentially reversible issue on appeal. So even if there is a conviction, Richard Allen still has a number of outs on the backside.
He's got, as I've always been saying in this case, he has the get a new trial free card, almost guaranteed. That's if he is convicted. And like I said, the jury may have already decided by now, by the time you're listening to this. But let's say he does get off, and they do find him innocent because there's a tremendous lack of evidence here. What kind of case does he have against Delphi for round two of this, where it's Richard against them?
Oh, totally. There are potential civil rights claims that he can bring, that anyone can bring.
Mhm.
If there is what's called malicious prosecution or abusive process, and it's really the government uh, realizing some problems with the case, waiting 5 years to even bring it,
Mhm.
and then failing to establish that a person was guilty after he's been held in solitary confinement for God knows how long. He will certainly pursue civil avenues after this, and it could bankrupt the small governmental municipality of Delphi.
It has echoes of the case out of Manitowoc, Wisconsin, the Making a Murderer documentary, Stephen
Yeah.
Avery, where there were the accusations of murder against him. He was even found and put away, and then they found evidence that exonerated him, and he got a million some dollar judgment against the city. And then the city, that's a lot of money for Manitowoc. It ain't a big place. Been there many times. And like, he killed Teresa Halbach back here in his junkyard, and we know how that has all been sitting, never having to make the payment on that bill. Um, I don't know. It's just going to be an interest. It reminds me of that. So I would say to Richard Allen, I'd be a little bit concerned if you do get off. I'd be just kind of getting out of Delphi, maybe do the lawsuit from a distance. I don't know. It just seems like there might not be a lot of up and up police work going on his part there.
You bring up an important point because we think that, oh, if someone is wrongfully accused and then they bring a civil lawsuit, they're allowed to do that and it's cool,
Yeah.
whatever. But the reality is that the government's not going to like that, and they might find some other way to go after him if he tries to poke the bear. So on the balance, is it better off for him to just go on about his life if he is acquitted? Maybe.
You make a very good point. That may be the best option. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.